Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about the first part of a three-part series, and this is NESARA Explained, and we're going to talk about what in the world was happening and is happening in the world. Coming right up. Okay, so what's going on? What's happening in the world? I can't show you these videos because of YouTube policies, but I'll show you on this next slide right here a couple things I want you to look at. So on the screen, I want you to look at the one on, excuse me, on the left. So Biden's sitting there, and a couple things that are happening. So this is one day after he is supposedly in office. Now, a couple of things you got to see. Number one, there is a car right behind and is over his right-hand side. I'm looking down here so I can see what you're seeing there too. On his right-hand side, and that can't happen in the White House. There's nothing over his right side. That's just lawn issues. Excuse me, and then in front of him, he is signing one of his idiot executive orders. Now, here's the reality. He complained that Trump, during all the debates, he complained that Trump, anyone would have been a despot if he was signing executive orders. What is he doing on his first day? Signing a snot load of these things. Some good anons have actually looked at this a little closer and found out he's signing nothing. Many times he was told, oh, I don't know where to sign, so he signs like in the middle of the page or some stupid stuff. The whole thing and by the way, he's sitting there with an idiot mask on when no one else is around him, okay? It's all for show, and promise you it isn't even the right place, okay? There's a lot of things that kind of show us this isn't even done in the real White House. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. Now, look over to the picture on the right. Now, I want you to look up at me for a second, and as you're kind of glancing over to this, here's what I want you to realize. Now, I have had 3 ACL surgeries on my left knee. Okay, but I've had tons of ankle injuries. Now, I'm pretty darn good. I'm not an expert in orthopedic issues, but I will tell you that I know my body pretty darn well. Now, you can have a twisted ankle. So just watch me as I go. If I had a twisted ankle, what would happen is that I would kind of walk like this. You know, I might be walking around just kind of gingerly on it. Normally twisted ankles, and I'm not talking about if you're older, but when you're in normal age, sorry about that, your normal age kind of thing, you know, it's a week to 2 weeks injury kind of thing. You know, then you're back to doing your things you want to do. If you have a first-degree sprain, you would actually walk like this without really kind of moving it. You would pick up your foot and you'd be walking in that kind of pattern just because it would be so difficult. Second degree sprain, it actually has to have a boot on it. By the way, that gives you a clue. And then a third degree sprain is what you have when you tear an Achilles in that kind of case. Now, this is one day in November after he supposedly broke or whatever his ankle. Now, I say whatever. I mean, it was supposedly some type of fracture event. Now, look at what he's doing, because he's stepping on the right foot and stepping up with the left foot, which no one can do the day after. See, if you're not seeing through the idiot stuff that the media tells you, you're not hearing the truth. Inside of this, do you know that anyone who has a anklet, which is a arrest monitor point, he was arrested. This is, we could do tons of different ideas out there, or tons of different statements of political people and actors and all kinds of these morons. And this is telling you that he was arrested because of the steal of the election. Now, let's go to the next slide. On the left one here, I want you to look at two different pictures. First off is the supposed, the real Joe Biden back in the 90s or the early 2000s when he was a vice president. Now look at the picture to the right. Does that look like the same guy? Now I want you to look up here. Okay, I'm an audiologist, which means I'm an expert in hearing. Okay, look at the connection on the picture to his left, and it is an earlobe that is not connected. So it kind of hooks up over here. Mine's connected. Look at the picture on the right, and the earlobe is connected. That is a telltale sign it's not the same person. Really simple. You guys haven't been paying attention to this. Who is that? That's the actor. Sorry, it's just a simple actor. People want to talk about clones. Stop with the clones, okay? More simple, straightforward answer. It's an actor, and he's got a mask on. Now I want you to read we're going to read word for word what this moron talks about. This is a direct quote in April of 2020. We cannot let this, we've never allowed any crisis from the Civil War straight through the pandemic of 17 all the way around the 16, when we have never ever let our democracy's sake second fiddle way that we both can have a democracy and elections at the same time. And this guy got the most electoral votes and the most number of election people out there, 81 million. You know the truth. That's a lie. That's a lie from the pit of hell. Just do it correctly and realize this is stupidity here, okay? And on our next slide here, I want you to see the very top one. Now this is actual, I just clipped it from YouTube. So when you clip it from YouTube, this is supposedly their the people are running along with a C-130 here. I think that's what that is. Apologize if I got that wrong. But basically the airplane with this is a military airplane. And now I want you to look at the little supposed areas where we have his windows. And if you notice, it's just completely blacked out. First off, it's not going to be blacked out in that way. It looks funny. Now, when you just pull, and I have deposit photos. I just put it out here with this too. And on deposit photos, it indicates this is a same exact airplane, but the real airplane. And you notice that you can see through the windows nearly at the same angle. I know one is looking this way, one's over here, but the reality is you would see through that airplane. What is that? It was gaslighting you, and it was telling you a story. And in the story, this was not true. This was CGI. Guys, what you're seeing around you is CGI. Next page. Now, I want to just tell you what the story of this pretty lady, she drives up to the drive-thru. Here's exactly what she says, okay? She's coming up to a Starbucks, and on the right, she looks over and he goes, I need to give you, can you wear your mask? She goes, can't you just give me the drink? Well, I need to give you a mask. Wait, you can give me a mask, but you can't give me the drink? And he pauses there. He's like, well, now he realizes how stupid he sounds, okay? But he's beholden to his job and the idiot policy. This is a very common thing for these morons, okay? You might have done that as well because I had to do it for my job. The answer is stop. If you think you're violating something that is inside of your mind, stop it right now. Because then she says, this makes no sense. He can give me a mask, but he can't give me the drink. Makes perfect sense, okay? Now on the picture to the right, we have how the media creates the panic. Now just focus on the dude behind the camera. He's got a coat, no mask, no gloves, no nothing. He's probably 6-8 feet, in an angle. We're off in this kind of direction. And the moron in front of the camera has got an N95 mask. She's got the full garb like she's in a BSL-2 lab. And she's looking at her phone and the whole thing. You're seeing a movie type of thing. Now, when people, I say see in a movie, they get kind of frustrated. The reality is they're trying to, the idiot CABAL, okay, the gross group of people, are trying to put forth a type of narrative because they can't put it up there correctly. And you've got to be able to see through the movie, okay? That's what I need you to catch. On the next slide, look at this for half a second. I'm just going to pause. I just want you to look at the screen. And on the screen, these are educators, or probably the administrative staff, okay? Every one of them smiling and not wearing their frickin' masks. And yet the little kids are masked up. Are you catching the reality here? This is the sickness of the system. Now, one of the fascinating things, we can kind of do this here, but the next one is this real kind of cool video called How to Speak Bidenese. And he just goes through a whole bunch of different words that idiot Joe keeps saying, and everyone's not listening. You're not hearing what he's saying. You should be saying, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't follow with the truth. But that's what you're missing if you listen to the moron media, okay? Only check for your own stuff. I mean, you can go research all of the stuff I'm talking about. Happy to let you see it, okay? Next screen. I want to share with you as we go along in the history of the cabal, okay? So I'm going to say the word, I don't care. No, I'm just going for it anyway. What you have to catch is there is a series of moronic points that are happening out here, okay? Through the 1800s, and I want to say basically the late 1870s all the way to 1907, we have bank failure after bank failure almost every couple years, okay? And what they were trying to do is they were trying to set up the need for a new type of monetary system. See, they wanted to pull away from gold standard, and they really wanted to make some changes on that thing. Now, what you don't know is that 1871, they actually came up with a new constitution. And in that new constitution, they totally changed the wordings that are in there. See, when most, even, I'm talking about the left and the right, I'm talking about both Republican, Democrats, they're both sitting in the swamp together, okay? You think that we're only talking about the Democrats or the left. We're talking about the whole system in there, okay? It all needs to go and be flushed down the toilet, okay? The reality is that when they talk about constitution, they'll give you words like democracy. I'm going to give you a little background on democracy. Democracy basically stipulates that if the group of people agree to a point, 62% of the people agree to an idea, A, okay? That it becomes the rule of law. What you're missing when you see this information is this. This law, even if it's voted on by the people, must be put through the filter of the Constitution, the real Constitution that you and I can go read for ourselves. And who does that? The legal portion of our government. John Adams came up along with the other founders, but he was the one that really looked at this in the executive and the legislative branches. I mean, that there was a check and balance system with the bicameral Congress, okay? The point of the Congress and the Senate is they were working together and they must check and balance each other. Then when the presidency gets it, he can cut the bill out, but put back for a 2/3 veto. And if they put through a veto, it goes through. But the legal system must look at that law, whether it's passed by democratic means or passed by a Congress. It has to be shown to be legally binding within the strictures of the Constitution. So that's just a real quick one right there. Are we a democracy? No. We are a constitutional republic, but they have corrupted it since around this time frame, okay? So you're misunderstanding if you think that you've learned about this thing and we're a democracy. That's a balderdash lie. The reality is that 1912 was a very, very important year. In 1912, they were understanding what they needed to do. See, in 1907, after the last bank run, up to about 1911, excuse me, in 1911, what they had to accomplish is a new way of thinking about this. So in 1911, they were working through Jekyll Island. The Creature of Jekyll Island is a great book. You got to read it. It's 25 years old. It's a superlative understanding of the Fed. So first off, it was the Aldrich Act that was right around here a little bit before this major election time frame. And the Aldrich Act was a central bank, and it was roundly pushed out. And Aldrich backed his way out of this thing so that he wouldn't be forward on this point. Now, in 1912, we have Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt fighting against each other, right and left. There you go again, right and left. And guess what they both were? They both were backed by the federal bankers. Now, at the time, they were just the J.P. Morgan, the other different trust points out there. And they were backing it so that they could push through the Federal Reserve. But there's a problem. So even if they get the election here, they needed to get some of the power puppies out of the way. The Titanic is a powerful point that we have to consider. First off, the Titanic happens in April of 1912. J.P. Morgan actually has ownership of the White Star Line. Now, one of the problems that happens inside of the White Star Line that you're not following is that we have two carriers that are, or two ships in essence, that are sister ships, and it's the Titanic versus, I'm blanking the name out here. Oh, right, the Olympus. Just had a brain fart there. Okay, sorry. So what happened is that the real Titanic actually had a small wreck. It wasn't huge, but it was a small wreck. So what they did, so that they could make this correct, they renamed this the Titanic. Now, why would they would take the Olympus carrier and rename it into the Titanic? For a couple money reasons. Number one, if this goes down, you only get $3 million from the insurance money. But if a new one goes down, you get $11 million. So we should change the name. By the way, when you go through the records of this whole thing, it's ridiculous. You can find it out. You don't even have to trust me. You can go through a PBS broadcast that actually explains this whole thing. Now, one of the problems that happens as they go along, as well as a billion other issues, is that first-class passengers have always been known at the time frame or easy to get off the ship. Now we have around 2,200 people and only around 1,500 go down with 700 people-ish getting off the ship. Now we easily have enough room in the boats, but why do three dudes, John Astor, Isidore Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim, who would all be $11 billion representation. We're talking about billionaires, okay? Why would they not be a part of this group of people getting off the ship? They could. Have you ever seen a billionaire that doesn't rush up in front of the line and say, my life is more important than yours? You've never seen that. But how come all three of them were against the Federal Reserve? This was the first of called a false flag. Now, a false flag, sorry, doing that a little bit wrong there. The false flag is a type of event that you kill a whole bunch of people. This is what the cabal does. Look over here. Don't look at what we're doing over here. Look over here. Focus on this. So they wanted you to focus on the tragedy of the Titanic and not how they were killing off three important members who would have sunk the Fed. They had to kill those guys off. But they did it through a gigantic lie. That's how false flags work. And we'll talk more and more as we go along here. So this allowed the Federal Reserve to come in under Wilson's control. Now, what's interesting about the Federal Reserve, when this happens in 1913, so December 23rd, 1913, and here's another event. All the senators and the congressmen are out. The senators are out on their Christmas break. It goes right through the Congress, goes right through the Senate, goes up to Wilson's desk. He signs it with a little bit of fanfare, and then people go, wait a second, what just happened there? Because what it had involved in it is in our next slide, is the IRS. It put in the IRS. See, the definition of corruption is illegal behavior by officials and a departure from the original text. What text will we be talking about? Constitution. That's the text that we need to follow with. And in the Constitution, it actually clearly states no taxation without fair representation. That's exactly what we fought over in 1775 in the Boston Tea Party. They were throwing over the tea because we had to pay the tax on it, and that was the only thing that we could drink. So they said, well, just chuck it over the side. The reality is compound interest is illegal inside of the Constitution. We'll get into that a little bit more as we go along. But I want you to look at the right side of the screen here and talk about the strong arm tactics of the IRS. And by the way, the IRS came in exact same time frame as the Fed. It was a part of this thing so it could take a part of people. And we'll talk about this as we go along here, as we'll keep pushing this kind of point in here. But why does the government cover up the $300 billion of interest that happens in national debt for a for-profit company, privately controlled business, deceptively named the Federal Reserve, which is just as federal as Federal Express, a company which refuses to reveal the names of its owner, although the Constitution clearly states that only Congress may make the money for the people without a middleman, which they're not supposed to charge as interest upon the money, but they do every single day. This is why they do this. They're trying to push their concept. So I want you to see over here for a second. This is how it works. So you come over here on this side and you pay your, let's say, $10,000 of IRS taxation. Most people believe that it comes and pays for the schools, nope, the roads, nope, and then ... I mean, they just come up with other things that they do. There's none of those things happening within the IRS taxation. It firstly goes to the IRS. Now, then they take their cut out of it to get their money. The next level, just to make it sort of legal, puts it out to the Treasury Department. Treasury Department. And in the Treasury Department, they take their cut out of it too. Then we come over here to the Fed. Now here's the important step, because there are two major steps involved with the Fed. So the first step is that they're going to take 6% of the total and pay it to the people on the board. They get 6% of the total. Now, what is that total? It's normally about $3.3 trillion. And they just get to pocket that money. But then they do something even more fun. Then they're going to pay down the national debt. So they're really only going to be making interest payments. They're not paying anything else. They're not able to pay anything else because they can't possibly come up with a way to pay for this stuff because the national debt is sitting in the range at this point in time. This is in April of 2022, $31.5 trillion. They're way underneath the ability to pay for this stuff. They're not even close. And this is how they take from you. Then they send out their request out to the U.S. Mint. Okay? And here's the thing. They take $6 trillion to make more physical money and $25 trillion to make out some digital money. And this is one of the things you're going to find out here in a second. This is the sickness of the system. Then they put it out through the economy. And they tell you about the fiat currency, that it only works because of the confidence of the system. Now here's the part of the problem you're not tracking along with as you go. And we will keep pushing these little concepts as we talk about them. But the reality is, from 1913 all the way up to 2020, this is going to freak you out when you realize this. Of the digital and the physical assets that were ever created by the banking system, only 20% of the total that has ever been made has come through this time frame. But why is it from 2020 to 2022, we have 80% of every digital physical dollar that was ever created was done in this time frame. See, this is a level of hyperinflation. And this is a hyperinflation to beat the band. Now, we're going to show you some more points about the hyperinflation that is not as bad as you think it is. It's actually worse and better in the ways that we'll put it. So we'll explain that as we go along. But that's a key point, that component that you have to catch. Okay? Let's move on to our next slide here. I'm going to grab something to drink as we go along here. Okay. So let's go over the short background. Again, who in the world are these morons here? Well, guess what? They're all the private bankers, the one that killed the people on the Titanic. So these are all the big central banks. We'll keep coming back to these idiots as we go along, but you also have to know the Queen of England has always gotten her entrails inside of our system. And we could go through this with the War of 1812. It had nothing to do with the 1812 time frame. It was that we already had a central bank because Alexander Hamilton actually enacted it in the second presidency as the Treasury chairman under Adams, which Adams was one of my favorite presidents because of some of the stuff that he did. Most people don't like him. But he believed in a central government that was way too powerful in this point. But they gave money to the Queen. And they were paying money to the Queen until 1812, where they said, well, they ran out of money. And then they came in and attacked. There's so many things you don't understand about your history. Now, the reality is that once these idiots set it up here, and they only set it up in 1913, we jump over to 1914, not even a year later before they enact their first big event. This was a massive money maker. That 30 million people die in World War I. Now, some of the idiot history books try to tell you 10 million people. It's a lie from the pit of hell. And here's the point. Some little duke, Archduke Prince Ferdinand and his wife are shot in the streets of Sarajevo. And yet, a whole war comes together. When you look at through the war, and normally it was this country versus that country, or these countries versus these countries. So it might be a little bit more of a conglomeration, right? We have all these names of wars that explain things, like the War of the Roses and on and on. But we had to come up with World War I because we lost track of all the people that were against each other. But did you know that our Fed bankers, writing things wrong here. The Fed bankers gave money to both sides. And it was a point. It's so that they could bring the money into America, which we move in to the 1920s into the boom. This is called the Roaring Twenties. And here's how the basic next step of their steal comes in. So they stole from the world to get this. And this bankrupted the world over, and it would be in the late 20s before this would actually occur. So how they first set this up is they set up a point of margin. Now in margin, what would happen is, I want you to just bring up a point. So Scott wants to buy a company called XPP. Okay, fictional company. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now in XPP, we're going to say it's $10 a share, and he wants to get 10,000, which he normally would have to pay $10,000 to buy that company, right? They said, nah, you just have to come up with 10%. It's like the point of the tithe. Isn't kind of interesting? Just come up with 10%. So you have to come up with $1,000 so that you could own 10,000 shares. Now you always have to pay back the margin, okay? There's always a call. The call would always happen when you sold it. That was how it was written in that way. Now we go through this time frame until 1929. And what you're missing in the point is that in February, these idiot Fed bankers met and they said, we're going to put something called, referred to as a call. And they were going to put a different time frame. It was going to be off in the fall before they would set this time frame. Now, let's just say that Scott's stock has now gone up to $30 for that 1,000 shares, or it's worth $30,000. Now, at this time frame, that's a massive amount of money. That's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in essence. Now, Scott still has to pay back the $9,000, but he would have $21,000 in his bank account. Well, it's tons of money, right? How did they fix this? First, they start with a false flag. Now go look at this, and Bugs Moran shoots up 7 men in Bloody Valentine's 1929. I submit to you that this is another false flag. Don't look at what we're doing over here with the Fed meeting. Look over here in Chicago with this Bloody Valentine shooting. Holy cow, this is bad. Don't look. Here's a false flag event, because the Fed always does something and they cover their tracks. Now, in October, we have the event. Now, it was actually occurring a little bit as we go along. And we needed buyers. But there were none. No one was buying. Everyone was selling. So my stock that was at $30 goes down to something called penny shares. This is the first time, gosh, I cannot type, right here today. Sorry about that. This is the first time that we actually see this term. And so the stock might be worth 3 cents, let's say, okay? So it's worth $300. Well, I'm not even close to paying back this. So I lose every bit of it. They don't just give you back the $700. You don't get anything. I mean, they don't give you the $300. You don't get anything because you still haven't paid your amount back. That's just the way that they stole it. And then that thing, the shares would raise up, and they stole from Scott. And we turn around and we move into the 20s, excuse me, up to the 30s, and we have a massive crash, and it wipes the people out. So they got my money up front. Do you see how that works? Now, under FDR, we come to one of our bankruptcy points. If 1913 is the beginning of it, and we'll talk more and more as we go through here, every about 20 years, we have another bankruptcy event. And that bankruptcy event was when FDR said, we're going to go off the gold standard. Now, this is a point of reference. Now, I've said this wrongly in the past. Can I admit my mistakes? Yes. So it's not going off the gold standard. Now, we couldn't have gold for our money. So in essence, that is correct. But the world could turn in their cash for gold. So what they did is they went from $20 a share, and they moved that price up to $33 a share only 1 year later. So they devalued our cash. Sounds exactly like this system over here. And by the way, at the same time frame, we were definitely having IRS taxation. So they were getting you coming and going. They got you on your amount of your money. The other governments were good because that number stabilized from around about 35 and stayed that way all the way through 71. We'll talk about that one another time. So they created the fiat currency. So they get you with your IRS taxation. They devalue the currency so that it's always reduced every single iteration that the U.S. Mint puts out the money. So by the time it comes back to you, you have something called devaluation, or another term is called inflation, which means that prices rise in the situation when the money is reduced. Okay? Do you see the sickness of the system? But did you know that God is all a part of this system in a fascinating way? If we look at our next screen here, what does the Old Testament say about corruption? Now, I want to kind of address another issue over here, and we're going to kind of go through this in a really unique way. Now, I teach end-time issues quite significantly. Lots and lots of people, and I'm going to say this about 14 times in this event here, lots of people are saying, we're in the end times, it's so bad, we're in our tribulations, okay? I hear this all the time. Like, do you understand it's called the tribulation period? Here's what we have to look at. The Bible indicates that over 650 prophecies about a 7-year tribulation event. It starts with the introduction of the Antichrist by Jesus himself, the first seal in Revelation 6. And Revelation 13 indicates that they have to have the Antichrist, which we get to the false prophet, which we get to the image of the beast, before we can get to the mark of the beast. That is how the order processes. You don't get to mess with the order, because heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will never pass away, which is Matthew 24:35. And we actually have to follow the pathway of the Bible. You don't get to change because I want to manipulate it. But let me show you this fascinating verse. Now, in Psalms 91, verse 8, this is a special verse for me because I went through a healing situation in December of 19. I was in an ICU with 40 pages of notes of all kinds of tests they ran. Then they had 13 separate diagnoses. 15 physicians were arguing up one side, down the other. Bloody murder. They actually sent the results to 100 physicians all around the nation. No one had an answer for why this guy was psychotic. I was psychotic all the way through that Sunday night, the 22nd. 23rd, I got a little bit better. 24th, I woke up, walked out of the ICU. Freaked them out. Now, in the middle of this situation, I was seeing demons fighting in around me, okay? And this is a long set of understanding that I was doing. Now, I had a ministry partner named Sue who was praying over Psalms 91. Most people will take Psalms 91 and say this: though 1,000 may fall on your left hand and 10,000 on your right, the plague will not befall you. But that wasn't the cool verse. The verse next says, you will only see with your eyes and witness the punishment of the wicked. Now, you'll only see with your eyes and witness the 3 separate situations of conversation. Let me explain how this basically says. If you believe that there is a wrath coming, well, there is a wrath event that happens. It's called the great day of the wrath of the Lamb, which is the very last day of it all, okay? That's Revelation 14, verse 17, 18, 19, okay? Now, in this conversation, we're going to talk about 2 or 3 different situations here. Now, if you believe in what's called a pre-tribulational rapture of the church, which is a harpazo, a pulling out of the church, that means that the believers in Christ go up into heaven and they're in the wedding of the Lamb because they are the bride of Christ, okay? Ephesians 5. Now, if you believe in the pre-tribulation rapture, you would miss the great day of the wrath of the Lamb, or even the wrath events that would happen over the last anywhere from week to 30 days, depending upon your interpretation of that point. Now, there are other people who have a post-tribulation rapture, but they would call themselves pre-wrath event, because we are not appointed for wrath. And that is a conversation that keeps coming out. Now, even if you believe the pre-wrath position or the pre-tribulation position, guess what? Both of them agree with. They will not see the wrath events. Therefore, this verse is not an end-time verse, because it says you'll only see with your eyes and witness the punishment of the wicked. What is the punishment of the wicked? Which should have been in the last days. And here's my point. It's not a verse. This is definitely some time frame before the tribulation ever occurs. Job 27:17, he will heap it up, but the righteous will wear it, and the innocent will divide up his silver. When has that ever occurred? It doesn't happen in the tribulation period because everything just goes to hell in a handbasket, to use that kind of a phrase. It's not occurred. It's a weirder time frame right before the tribulation. Proverbs 28:8. Whoever increases his wealth through excessive interest collects it for the one who is kind to the poor. Wait, dudes are collecting all the interest. Excessive interest. Sounds exactly like compound interest. We will talk about that one next week. But the excessive interest kind of point, and collects it for the one who's kind to the poor, which means they get it so that they can give it to the poor. That's you. That's what NESARA is about. We will talk more about that. Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance for his grandchildren. But the next set of the verse is great. The sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. In other versions it says, the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. Both of them say the same basic point. The wealth of the wicked is stored for the righteous. And so many people have misunderstood this verse. We've claimed it was a prosperity gospel. And the answer is the word has to come true, because all scripture is God-breathed, approved for teaching, reproof, and edification, which is in 2 Timothy 3:16. So therefore, these words have to be true because God wrote them, and it was more important to him than anything else. And he is the personal guarantor of the Word of God. It has to come true. So therefore, we're going to see it in our lifetime. This is so cool. The New Testament talks about it as well. Next one. James 5:3, your silver and gold are corroded as a corrosion that will be a witness against you. It will eat you up like a fire, your flesh up like a fire. And the word witness is marteion. It's evidence against a person which would lead to his ruin. Think about that for a second. Evidence leading to one's ruin. What do you think that kind of evidence that we have against these idiots? We got tons of video evidence of them stealing, of them killing, of them destroying. We got it all. It's all there. 5:5 and 5:6 says, you have lived luxuriously on the land. You have indulged yourself for the day of the slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous man. He doesn't resist you. IRS withholding. This is the sickness. But the system is about to, because God says it so. Why does it do this? Because they tried to introduce the mark of the beast before they had the Antichrist. Now, unless you believe Idiot Joe is the Antichrist, which he can't barely tie his shoe or put on his diaper, we know that that isn't the case. So therefore, you can't put the mark before the beast. And you say, oh, well, it's the beast system. Because over and over and over again, if we have to fulfill Scripture, and we do have to fulfill Scripture because God deemed it so, and he is the guarantor of the Word, it is not a system. The Antichrist is a man, and it isn't this moron, okay? You'll see him later on, and it's because they tried to hijack the Bible, and God just said, no. Satan tried to kill me in December 20. God just said, no. Do I know why? No. Okay. How much debt is too much? And we will talk about this quite a bit, but I'm going to do it a little quicker, so we're going to keep going on this point, but because we will keep hitting this. We're just trying to set you up with the basics of this, because so many people are struggling with this point. But let me just put it to you this way. Business debt at 30 to 50% debt to income ratio. What the heck is debt to income? That's one thing I want to kind of tell you. Debt is that thing that you're paying for that is from the past. We're not talking about your electric bill, okay? In Oklahoma it's called PSO, okay? Your PSO bill is for the now, in essence. Obviously it's last month, but stick with me for a second, okay? Debt is something that you're paying for that it's in the past. Your PSO is just a utility bill that you would pay in the now, or your telephone bill, or whatever you want to pick, okay? Now, debt is things like houses and cars and student loans and everything else out there, credit issues, okay? Those are things that you have exist in the now, but you're paying for it over a time frame. And when your income, your monthly income, when we look at that, and if the ratio becomes 30% or more, you have the right to have bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy is either a liquidation, reorganization, and it happens the same way with personal and business debt, okay? Now, here's the reality. 30% is the ratio that they work from, okay? Now, back in 2009, I had a lawyer look at my stuff, and I realized that I was 90% debt to income ratio. I'm going to tell you how bad it was. See, some of you are struggling through your stuff, and I understand that. But I know exactly what it feels like. I lived it from day to day to day. I could barely pay my bills. I actually took money out of my second mortgage to pay my first mortgage. Dude, That is off the chart, okay? I know exactly what that feels like. But here's what we are today as a nation. We are sitting in the range of anywhere from 170 out to 200% debt to income ratio. And I was talking to a money manager about this conversation. And I said, so we can't live there, because I know, and he knew me very well. He's known me since this time frame. And he knew when I felt this. And he goes, yeah, but Japan's run at 200% debt to income ratio. That's not sustainable. There is a point in time where the situation, I'm sorry, I erased it here, when the situation, we've taken out way too much money every single time frame. We can't sustain this point. You see, even the people of Greece actually ran into the same problem. They had 40% of all their people who worked for the government. And if you had $70,000 in your savings for any type, they would knock it down to maybe $7,000. You could only get $50 in debit amounts or cash every single day. And they were stealing from you left and right. It actually is the reason for the British exit, which is called Brexit, out of the EU. Germany was having a hissy fit because they had to cover this thing. The reality is, if the USA goes out, see, some of you think the USA is going to go out of business, okay? And by the way, it's feeling that way. The reality is, if this occurred, you might want to just start throwing nuclear weapons out, because that's exactly where it would go. There is an answer for this thing. The answer has been thought about for a very long time frame by both sides. Why is 2020 such an important year to this point? It's because the bankruptcy was known about. It's been known about for a very, very long time, as I said. So 2020 was a point of bankruptcy. And America can't just go off the cliff. They can't drop them into the abyss, in essence, because we would have war. We're way too powerful of a nation. We would have war, and then there would be everything going on. And that's what some people believe. But the reality is there was two different events occurring. We had the Great Reset, and we have this thing called NESARA. Let's detail that as we go along here, okay? NESARA is the National Economic Stabilization and Reformation Act, okay? And I'll explain that just a little bit here. But you have to understand what this part is. This is what these idiots want you to believe that they want to do. They say, you will own nothing and you'll love it. Come on. This is stupid. They're going to pay off your student loans. Huh, that's helpful. But what about all these other loans? What they would push us through is another realm of going from a fiat to another one. It'd be a new fiat. And by the way, the World Economic Forum and all of these other morons all try to tell you about it. That's why people like Glenn Beck can't think about anything else, because the world is telling you this other story. And you're not hearing the full reality of this. Because here's what happens. When the CARES 2 Act comes out, here's what occurs. In February of 2020, a 1,000-page document called the CARES 1 Act comes out. I have a friend of mine who actually worked for the IRS. She read every single page. Fran read, she used to take the documentation the Congress would write and put it into IRS-ease, the information. So here's what happened. She says, this sucker was perfect. Okay, well, cool. They did a good job. Okay, great. How come like about 3 weeks later, they write a 1,200-page document. It's called CARES 2. And it was perfect. Now let me tell you something. I'm going to show you a book here. Revelations of the Red Pills, the fastest book I ever wrote. I wrote it just through December. It took 3 weeks to write, 3 or 4 weeks to write. And it's 140 pages or something like that. So we're talking about a book that I'm busting it up on, and I did it within 4 weeks. But how do you write a 1,000-page document and finish and go to a 1,200-page document? Well, enough people were writing it. Do you want to stick with that one? That's the dumbest thing in the world. The reality is, they pre-planned this. We know COVID-19 was pre-planned. We know this was pre-planned. But actually, Trump did something to hijack the system. Because here's what happened. And I was looking at this very carefully in 2020. Because I had been a part of writing loans with my manufacturers. I got a chance to do something most people will never get a chance to do. Now here's what happens when you have a loan, okay? A loan has to have a payment time frame, a payment amount, a amortization scale, okay? It has to have a percentage, and it has to have a credit check. And for businesses, it's called a personal guarantee. Now, what the heck does that mean? See, and I'm an S corporation, and it has to go right down through to get to Scott. Because if Scott goes out of business, they want to take their pound of flesh out of my rear end, okay? So what occurs, you have to have all of these different points in here. Now, when friends of mine, over half the people that heard about the PPP didn't go through it then. All you had to do in your PPP is keep employment. And you had to pay your people. That's what I'm trying to do. Here's what happened. There was no repayment point. There was no amortization scale. None was given on when I did this documentation. No, there was a percentage rate of 5%, but it was a fictitious number. And here's what's even weirder. There's no credit. You didn't even look at my credit. All they did is guarantee that I had pay to employees and that I wouldn't lose any employees. And there lastly was no personal guarantee. What? There's no personal guarantee. There's no credit. There was an interest rate on there, but it was going to be deleted. There was no amortization scale, and there was no payment plan. And here's how they did this thing. It was an SBA loan. That is coming from the Treasury Department to accomplish that loan. It's really powerful. Now, I already had a loan from someone else. I was never allowed to get SBA loans because I had a loan with a personal guarantee. So every time I would try to get a personal guarantee, I could never get it. It's really important to know that. Now, here's what's powerful. Scott was getting the PPP to pay my employees that I committed to pay. No matter what happened, I was going to commit to pay. Regent Bank, that I just moved into, was also getting money. And they talked to me about this issue. They were getting money every single time they did this. And they're like, wait a second. If I don't have to pay these idiots off, how are they getting the money? Because Trump went in there and hijacked it and said that the Treasury was going to house the Fed. And he already did it. If you don't catch how cool this was, he already did it. He already knocked him for a loop. And here's the point. NESARA is going to switch the money. We will talk about that more. I'm not going to get into this, but I will tell you that you got to watch the MASH episode, season 6, where Charles notices they go from a blue currency to a red currency. Blue pill, red pill. Guys, it's been in the ethosphere all the time. I'm not going to get off of that because we will talk more about that. But I'm telling you, this system was set up. And they set up the system to mess with you. But guess what? Trump went in and torched them. He already killed it off. Next slide. When we move into the NESARA system, it will revalue into gold. It's a 1-to-1 fiat to treasury note. You don't have to do anything. People ask all the time, don't have to go, do I have to call them, what about me? What about my money in the bank? What about the IRS? Calm down. It's called the QFS, Quantum Financial System. Russell J. Gould in 1999 started to create a quantum language. David Straight is a great one you guys got to look at. David Straight, his great information. Talks about the legal system and how your name is co-opted into the system and they just steal from you all the time. This whole process of stealing, they've been doing this for a long time. You got to, and he talks about like liberating yourself from it. But the QFS will liberate every person like that. Now, first off, in April 1, all the banks had to be Basel III compliant, which means they had to be compliant with the new system, the QFS system. Did you know that there was $83 trillion set to pay off the American debt and $47 trillion? But Obama blocked them. Now, we'll talk more about that next week, okay? There is also a rainbow currency. Now, some people call it rainbow currency, or we call it, U.S. Treasury note. There's $10 trillion set aside because Trump brought in the same time frame when the CARES Act was coming around, he brought in 286 million of ounces of gold. Hadn't been in here forever. Where did he get it from? From these idiots. Took it right from them. An executive order 13818. It blocks the property, which is every single little thing that they have. It blocks the property of them. If they have crimes against humanity, you're going to see in a very short time frame when the EBS hits, you're going to see all the evidence against them. We already have it all. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for. People ask me all the time, how come you just believe this stuff so much? Am I so deluded? No, because my faith is resting in my evidence. I don't care about my hope. My hope gets dashed all the time. But my faith is over here in the evidence. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for and the promise of things unseen. And that's where the NESARA point is, because the evidence led me in this direction and I found it. I'd been learning about this since 2012, but I didn't know what the word NESARA meant. But they are going to take it away from the idiots and giving it back to you. Wait, wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. Let's end you with this kind of comment here. Just look at the first one over here, and you can kind of go see these later on here. But when you look at Fauci and you look at Biden in here, someone's trying to text me here. When you look at Fauci and Biden, here's one of the things that happens. Both of them have masks. Look at the one on Biden over there. He's got a mask underneath here. I mean, there's a big old nasty, spacing in there. It's not the same guy. There's a movie called in Mars here. There's this movie that inside of the movie is such a powerful movie. And what happens in 1999, or 1990, Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to Mars, and he goes through all the craziness, and he puts on a mask on top of himself. And then when he puts the mask on, and he takes it off. You see, Hollywood's trying to tell you a story, but you haven't been listening. Hollywood's been telling you a story, but you haven't listened. Now, the last one, again, this is a video that I can't really play in this kind of thing, but I want to share with you one of the things that are happening. So let me kind of give you a little information about how it's actually been going, okay? And how it's actually been known. Trump is supposed to jump out of the office on January 20th, right? He has to leave by 12, okay? Noon, okay, Eastern time. I wake up at 11, I'm on Central time, so way before this time frame. Now, here's what you don't know. Idiot Biden, I spelled it on purpose wrong, comes in not in Air Force One. Only president that ever showed up on non-Air Force One. Trump makes a speech a little bit before noon. He gets onto the helicopter. He flies on Air Force One, He goes to Mar-a-Lago, and he gets a 21 gun salute after he makes a speech over there. And you're like, I didn't catch it. He doesn't stay for the moronic ceremony. This ceremony starts way before that, 11:30, with Kamala, idiot Kamala, who's dumber than a box of rocks. She's taking her speech, and Biden gets up and gives his little conversation at 11:49. That's called fraud. You cannot have your event in that time frame. Guys, you're missing it if you don't see the whole reality of the cool stuff of this. Then they go to the tomb of the unknown soldier. There's 3 separate guns, and I'm watching. They're not even, they never show them. They never show them. It's so fascinating. I'm watching this going, aren't you going to see them walking around and looking at whatever, doing the thing? They don't do anything. The first cannon fires off, the second cannon fires off, the third cannon is just standing there. Boom, boom, nothing. Boom, boom, nothing. I think it was about 18 times. I mean, I'm like, what's happening? They're trying to show you none of that thing occurred. Now, if you were to see this video, you would have seen someone in the car as they're going to the White House. And you have soldiers, they're standing there like this. Some of the soldiers like this. Do they really do that to their own real new president? They're trying to tell you a story. What's the story of this whole thing? Is that Trump got it figured out. He didn't even go to this. You're supposed to go to the next inauguration. It's because he was not going to legitimize it. They lost. The Great Reset is dead. This sucker got placed in. You are going to have the wealth of the wicked coming to the righteous. Now, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to show you the processes of debt and the processes of the gold-backed currency and how they set up for you. We're going to explain how this thing works. Now, I know this kind of goes over top of this. I did the same presentation, but I've added so much more in here. That's why I wanted to go over some of this in a different way. So again, this is a little bit of a review from 2 years ago, but I'm adding some more stuff in there so you can understand the deception level of this. So this is the first part of the evidences. Now, you got to share this with your friends and family because this helps you understand what you've been missing. Wake up, for your redemption is drawing nigh. Thanks so much.